Welcome to Markers and Milestones. It is not March 20th. It is April 3rd, 2023. This is where we explore educational opportunities for young men and women beyond traditional college, all from a Christ-centered perspective. I'm Lee Bortons. I'm with my co-host, Amanda Kleist, and we're joined today by Phillip Johnson from Thales College in North Carolina. Phillip,
Hello,
introduce
all.
yourself, and thanks for
Hi,
being
yeah,
here.
it's been great to be on. I've known many friends and church members that have been involved with classical conversations for many years, and so I'm quite honored to get to share this time this evening with you.
Thanks. Okay, did I say the name right? Is it Thales? How do you guys pronounce it?
It is Thales. I think that there's probably a few classicists, like four, that may say that none of us are speaking ancient Greek correctly, but we say Thales. As long as you don't say Thales, you're okay.
Good. So I just have a lot of questions for you. So I try to go through the logistics, and then Amanda make sure we get through some of the philosophy, and then
Sure.
we end up with some personal stories. Generally, is how the hour goes.
Absolutely.
So could you tell us about your background before we talk about Thales? Because I think it's really interesting. You aren't necessarily you're not from a family that thought about training classicalists, and yet here you are, quite a robust classicalist in my mind. So you can tell people how just your educational journey.
Sure, yeah. So I've probably done, and this maybe this will catch shame, I've probably done everything except be homeschooled. So I I actually attended a public high school in the suburbs of Birmingham, Alabama. I generally had good teachers, good in the sense that I think they were moral people as they kind of pieced together conversations just outside of content. I think they were good people that wanted students to learn. And they were inspiring and passionate. I had a pretty strong upbringing in church, and I think that also provided a backing with it. I came from a Baptist background, and so was very strong in Bible, but not not a lot of like. I probably had heard of the city of Troy and knew about the city of Rome, but none of these classes I would have known. I do think that there is a place for the Hebrew canon in the New Testament as part of classical education. So that's not to contrast one or the other, but it was mostly Bible for me. When I went into college, I chose to go to Union University. So that is a Christian liberal arts university. It's an SBC affiliate for the state of Tennessee. And I ultimately chose to do engineering because I enjoyed mathematics and physics, but I wanted something practical. I was maybe thinking about industry, but I was really thinking about the international mission field as an 18-year-old. And so for the practical reasons, I went that way. I had thought about I was already kind of interested in some theology, and they told me that unless I wanted to go to undergrad for 6 years, that I couldn't study both. And so I chose engineering with the hopes to maybe study some things on the side. So I should give some caveat that impulse was already there in some capacity, and that setting helped to bolster that. So through some of the general ed requirements, the way they operated, and through the way some of our core classes like the Intro to Philosophy were taught, I was thankfully introduced to primary texts, and I got to read them and think deeply. There are good ways and bad ways to introduce concepts such as philosophy. There are some that kind of ignite a fire in the soul to think more deeply about things, and I was gratefully exposed to good texts and great books in some of those humanities courses with engineering. And I had a good engineering curriculum. I'm going to talk about how they're blended together, and I don't want to knock per se my engineering education, but there was something that it did seem a little bit disjointed. I think part of that is in the way physics is kind of thought of itself in the past few centuries, and so it's not a particular knock on that institution or really anyone doing engineering that has aspirations toward this. But at the time, the cracks started to form in that when we get to thermodynamics, you explain the concept of entropy. And so what is this? What actually is it? What does it mean? We say it's a measure of disorder. Well, what is that? And it's really tough for an engineer because entropy is just kind of something in a table. Physicists can talk about statistical mechanics models, but even that's a little bit unsatisfying. And so I knew that there was something missing, some questions that I had. I took a year off of school to spend some time in industry, and I worked as an HVAC manufacturing engineer and went home and then watched lectures. So I had a lot of life skills gained from my year working in industry. And I don't want to knock on that, but I'm trying to race to the point where this kind of is going to come together with the classical ed.
Well, take your time.
So sure, yeah, thanks. Because I went home and watched lectures, it dawned on me one night that I could do this, I could have a career here, but I am probably, there's a fittedness to me. A fittedness in the sense that, you know, I played football, being from Alabama, I played football from middle school to high school. And I got my letters and for my playing time, but the only award that I got on the team was that of a scholar athlete. And so there are moments in life where you recognize what your gifts are and what you're naturally inclined to. So that was a moment. Going home in industry, and I had a decent salary. But just wanting to watch lectures online, that was another moment of a fittedness. And it's like, I want to study more. And so I entered into a PhD program at Washington University in St. Louis. So itself kind of has its own background. It kind of fits in this sort of, we can talk a lot about elite education, but it's considered by those that view elite as such in a circle of institutions. I can have plenty of comments. I'm sure you can as well, Lee. But it was a very different culture from Union is what I want to say. A lot of access to nodes of power in the world, and a lot of resources, some of which I use more than others. I think I probably used the basement of the library where a lot of great texts were. I was one of the few and the proud that did so. And I did a PhD program. I completed a dissertation and spent half a decade of my life thinking about fire, thinking about carbonaceous particulates or soot that form in fire. It's a fascinating little world. And part of my own research, I don't know if I've shared this part with you before, part of my own research was asking the question, why do these soot particles form? So for those in the audience that haven't spent half a decade of their life, candle flames are orange because there are millions and millions of microscopically sized particle aggregates, really, that are so hot they're radiating. Those that have taken a physics class, they're emitting the radiation intensity and wavelength of a black body. So soot particles in a flame are very important, but how they form, we actually don't know. We know that once they create these little spherical balls that then attach to each other and form chain-like aggregates. But the chemistry to form those balls is still not yet understood. Combustion is a mature research field. We don't know why those little balls form. I mean, there's theories, but none of them have reached a consensus. As I began to explore those questions, I entered on a field of thermodynamics, which is, in my view, and this is controversial, it's somewhat teleological. So the upshot, again, for the expert in the room, if you know thermodynamics, you know that systems move such that they lower the free energy of that system, and that's the only way they can move. And I think that in of itself is saying that there is a purpose to motion. It's a desire to lower or minimize the free energy of a system. And I kind of looked in different avenues about some new ideas that looked at that and how these little particles form. But I wanted to bring ideas of purpose into science, and it's something that I'm still working on. It's a hard question, and no one wants to do metaphysics anymore. So I kind of had that thought process was a maturation of something that was on a journey. At that same time, in a contemporary mode, I was really found by someone in my local church. So again, the local church here added to my formation. There was someone that had completed a PhD, they had an MD first, and then completed a PhD in theology. So they got 2 doctorates, and they were on the faculty at St. Louis University. And they kind of mentored me. They saw that I was asking questions, also out of undergrad, that enjoyment of primary text turned into, I want to read the great books. I want to see the great books of the Western world. Some of the canon wars of there's these great texts, we should read them, we should preserve our heritage. And I wanted to read those on my own, but I found tutelage under someone that was like, you should read this, you can explore this. Yes, read all of Plato, and continue to read through the Christian Platonists. You can read Proclus the pagan, but look at what Dionysius the Areopagite says, look at Maximus. And so I explored that, and I probably put out less publications than I should have before I could defend my dissertation. But it ignited a flame in me, and it wanted me to it incited a desire in me to learn more and to truly appreciate not just the philosophical aspects, but science as natural philosophy, as a reflection on the goodness and orderliness of nature. There were times where I was like, maybe I should finish this and go off into the philosophy of science, but I ultimately said, no, I think that these ideas have a place within the so-called hard sciences and within the realm of exploring technology. And that field needs philosophy, probably more so than the philosophers need to read a little bit more about science. There's some great philosophers and historians of science, but the scientists themselves tend to ignore them, and they need to embrace this. 2020 was an interesting year. We'll call it interesting. That's the year that I defended over a screen. I'm still a little bit upset about that. I get to go back and have a redo of I got to walk a year later, but I defended and I took up a job as a postdoc at the University of Alabama, and that I will jettison just to say that I looked for faculty positions. And the choice came down, do I want to be a lecturer in mainstream academia, or do I want to have the freedom to explore something and do something new at Thales College, and to take some of these impulses of seeing science and engineering and learning that theory, but learning it in a way that comprehensively understands the broader tradition that we're a part of, and ask questions about purpose and order for the goodness of one's soul as you contemplate such things. And I saw that opportunity here, and so I jumped. And now I'm a resident of North Carolina.
Yeah, so for our audience, so let me just add something. I wanted Philip to explain that background, because Thales College is a brand new launch with private money behind it. And just starting an engineering college sounds like so intimidating and daunting. But Bob Luddy, who you can tell us some more about in a little bit, is the funding behind it. And apparently Bob saw you and said, here is a true classical engineer, classical scientist. So I just really think one of the main reasons you send children on to more education as adults is because of those people that are going to mentor them. And so I wanted our audience to know that there's folks like you out there who are both starting things that are new and not necessarily embedded in the modern way of education, but have this amazing classical background. So tell us about Thales and Bob, and kind of what the mission is and how long you've been around, just the logistics about Thales now.
Sure, yeah. And I should say, thanks, Lee. You give me too much honor, but thank you. Yeah. So I got excited about this because of what learning about what Bob has done in the past. So Bob Luddy's story in brief is that he started a company. He started a company that would then, I think there were a couple enterprises early on, but what ultimately became the company that is today, Captive Air. So Captive Air is a company that manufactures kitchen ventilation hoods and systems. So anytime you go into a restaurant like a Golden Corral, or really, it is almost never failed that when I ask someone, when I'm having lunch with someone and I say, have you heard of Captive Air? And they say no, and I look up to the hood, that the sheet metal it's overhead of the grill that cooked their food, it has the Captive Air stamp on it. So you have, bending sheet metal, you have all the ventilation fan and whatnot. He also has looked at HVAC, so a lot of air units that are on top of buildings that help service the air, ventilate it and cool it, etc. And he's been doing that for 40 years, and the company has grown. It's all over the nation. There's multiple sites. I'm not going to quote a number because I'm going to get it wrong, but I do know that he has plants on top of being headquartered here in North Carolina, with a manufacturing plant down the road that we use as part of the training for our engineers. Florida, Oklahoma, California, Pennsylvania. And so the company has just really grown and it's had success. But around the early mid 2000s, Bob wanted to get into education reform, and I think he ran for some type of board or some type of government position, effectively, to oversee how education works. And I don't know if it panned out. I don't think he got the position, and I think he said he was glad, because the process of seeking that office kind of showed, you saw how the sausage was made. It was pretty gross, I think. We said, he's an entrepreneur. He started a business, so he's going to start a series of schools. So what then followed is he opened a charter school named Franklin Academy. He then opened St. Thomas More Academy, which is a Catholic confessional school, but it's operated privately. So it's blessed by the bishop, but operated by Mr. Luddy and Company. And then Thales Academy is the one that started I don't know, in the past decade or so. I'm going to get my numbers off exactly. So Thales Academy is now multi-site. It's in multiple states. I think they have on top of North Carolina, and it's in the dozen or so, I don't know, 12 to 16 campuses, and it's a school system, K through 12. There's 3 high schools in North Carolina, but they have I think a K through 8 in Tennessee and also in South Carolina now, and I think they're looking to build in Virginia. So again, more growth. Thales Academy is not confessional, but it adheres to a broader classical tradition of the Western canon, Judeo-Christian values, etc. And really, there's a moral code that the students need to abide by. I mean, there is a buy-in of we need to learn the ideas that are important for our careers and life, but we need to be shaped by standards. So that kind of ethos is behind Thales Academy, the classical school system. And I think in some point, about a half decade ago, 5-6 years ago, there was already an itch to start a college. And so I think starting a college has quite a few layers of bureaucracy to it. And so through a series of paperwork and personnel, there was a hard launch this fall. So our doors just opened with our first cohort of students that's three majors. So we have a classical education major, and I believe that holds a double major with a liberal arts degree. So it's very heavy on a good classical core. There's a business major, which also retains that core, and then engineering, which the Dean of Humanities, my colleague, Peter Forrest, is sad that the engineers don't get as much of that classical core, but they still retain a hefty amount of Western Civ, writing and rhetoric, plenty of politics, philosophy, and economics. But as you know well, Lee, engineering degrees, especially if they're going to be regulated, they have a certain number of seat hours with all these engineering courses. So you ran into the problem that I ran into a decade ago, is that you may want to study philosophy formally with a degree, but it'll have to be on the side. Or if you come to Thales, you can just have it injected into your calculus and physics course, like what I've done.
Yeah, so that's the thing that was also, I thought, interesting, is that you recognize if the engineers aren't going to get as many of the core classical courses, you're not like separating engineering, math, and science from that you're actually going to integrate philosophy into each of those seminars. So could you maybe give an example of a question that an engineering student might explore in, say, their materials class or their physics or calculus class?
Right,
So
yeah.
Karen can see what that is.
Sure, yeah. So some of this is work in progress in its ideas. I have my own great books list. I don't know if I'll publish it someday of people in text that I'll inject in these courses. So what we've done thus far, to various measures of success, and some students have given me feedback, saying, "What can't I just do math?" But in calculus, we read everything from, we did a little bit of Plato. We looked at the Euclidean sort of propositions on the method of exhaustion, how Archimedes used that. We talked about Aristotle's objection to infinity, because calculus is, it's algebraic operations that are done such that you are summing up an infinite number of times infinitesimally small quantities. And so you really have a double portion of infinity. And one of the reasons it took so long to develop is the aversion to this idea of infinity. And so it's really a course it's begging for a robust philosophical reflection on infinity, which then naturally leads to humans have been thinking, as long as we've thought about God, which has probably been forever, as long as we've been humans, we've thought about the infinite. And if you actually trace the intellectual development of calculus in the Western world, the breakthrough did not happen until you had some Christian mystics like Nicholas of Cusa say, not just potentially infinite, but there is an actual infinity, and that is in God, and we can be comfortable manipulating infinity. So that's turned more into a seminar discussion and some papers thus far that have sought to kind of inform more of the techniques that we do when we then go to think about limits and derivatives and integrals, etc. With physics, similarly, physics 1 is normally taught with a heavy dose of Newtonianism. We say that if Aristotle gets mentioned, it's a 2-liner about how he was wrong, and that's normally a lot. That's normally not even included at all. And we just say, let's start with F equals ma. Let's sum our forces, do our component analysis, etc. And again, it's been a bit of a gallop in this course, because I've had to do that on top of saying, no, there's a backstory here. we need to think about what is a force, because Newton wrestled with this, and Leibniz called Newton spooky because forces have agents. And so forces are easy to think about when you're pushing or pulling something, when a machine does something, but gravity has no apparent agent. Gravity happens in space. Gravity is kind of like a ghost-like force. How can action at a distance happen? It's my hope that reflecting on these questions makes students realize the importance of metaphysics, the importance of philosophical and theologically informed premises, that this is not just done in isolation, and that having a certain metaphysics says something. So the kind of most intense thing that I said to the students is that Newtonianism is in a way an ontology of violence. And what I mean by that, I think the word violence is used in all kind of uncharacteristic ways in discourse. Say what I mean by that is that if you say that the world, and Newton I think believed there was order. Newton believed in God. There's some questions about the orthodoxy of his Christian views, but he very much is a theist that believes in a good and noble cosmos. But Newtonianism, as it developed in the mechanical philosophy, those that then took it other places, we live in a world of bodies that collide and just hit each other, and they all have forces attached to them. And so it's a world of chaos and collisions, and the greatest force, the greatest net resultant force wins. And so it's dominance, it's violence. This is what Aristotle would have called violent motion. And when you view the world that way, of it's just forces to overcome, that takes away things like the harmony of motion, and it takes away things like purpose. It's hard to read Romans 8 when you think that the world is a bunch of colliding bodies. And so what I'm going to do, hopefully at the end of the course, is bring back things like, hey, there's something called the principle of least action. And some people have taken these concepts like the conservation of energy and done something with them to say there might be a purpose to motion, and it might have something to do with its creator. These are scientists, and these are not, and this is the beauty of reading the tradition, is you recognize that this idea we have that there are religious people that can't do science, and then there are real scientists that know that you keep religion out. That is no one would have said anything like that until 80 or 90 years ago. You can't read Descartes and Newton and Leibniz and the Bernoullis, all of these people, like the word God just comes dripping off the pages all the time. And so when you read the primary text, you see this. There's no sort of cognitive dissonance about talking about these things at the same time. And that's the benefit to have. Now, some engineering courses are going to be more difficult than others. Statics and fluid dynamics have their own sort of histories. Here's where I actually bring in some modern concepts again, this is why I took the time to bring up thermodynamics and free energy minimization, because you can bring back the purpose that way. Some of them are hard. We'll see if I have enough time left over in my electronics and controls courses, after we cover diodes and op amps and transistors and PIDs and PLCs, if I have time left over, we'll see what I can do. But some of the courses probably will be, hey, you need to get your stuff done so that you can learn this and be a competent worker, because then that's important too. There is another half. I'm going to talk a lot about I've talked a lot already about the classical education side of this. There is another half of what Thales does, which is to get students prepared for industry. So there's a heavy practical side of that we could explore, but
yeah, go ahead, tell us about the practical side now.
went from the theory to practice.
Well, the thing is that, I mean, everybody needs both, right? I mean, Amanda and I want to have, as part of our educational model, that we believe that we should raise plumbers who read Milton. So you told us about the Milton side of things. Tell us about the plumber side of things.
Right. Yes. And again, too, and I this is preaching to the choir on your podcast, but thinking about these ideas will make you a better person, morally better and better plumber, hardworking, ethics, all of these things go into that. Also, too, as some engineers, we're known at being competent in some areas, but maybe communications and being savvy with ideas is not always that. And it's my hope that by forcing through some extra reading and writing, that'll help. So there's some practice to the classical, but then there's the practice of the content. So there's the theory, the way we teach. I'm hoping there's some details about how I've rearranged some of the curriculum, which I think will be an advanced sort of exposure to good ideas. But there's practice. So Mr. Luddy, as I mentioned before, he has this company, and he employs a lot of engineers, and he has to hire a lot of new engineers. And he's expressed, mild frustration that there's a whole crop of, engineers that come out of school these days, and they may know formulas well. They may be able to know the puzzle games to solve textbook problems, but real complex problems, thinking through things, or sometimes even common sense are just not there. And so it's like, that's going to be fixed. And so one of the ways that we're fixing it is right now in that first cohort, we're in term 2. So it's their first spring semester. And we are putting them through an engineering boot camp, which is everything from things that technicians would do to all the way up to engineers or both. You know, having an engineer that could do the work of a technician is critical, and we can't lose that heritage. And so what this means is that we've done everything from MIG and TIG welding. We have cut and crimped wires and tied them together in control panels. They've looked at feeding drawings into laser cutting, machine laser cutting, and other CNC punches. And then in the last few weeks, we're going to look at how it all kind of comes together in a grand HVAC unit. And so being in industry that early on, not only do we see those technical processes and they work with their hands, so they're the ones crimping the wires and getting used to working with their hands, but also there's just things that you learn about being in industry that are not in the academic world, and how you interact with people. So there was one day I particularly remember where one of the engineers wanted to make a point about how a certain electrical current went through this device that he made. And so we kind of commandeered a drawing from the table, and he was explaining something. Well, the person who was on the clock, the linesman, they come in like, I need the paper. And so watching that interaction between an engineer who technically has the authority in that relationship to commandeer the paper, and then the person that's wanting to get it done and knows that the engineer doesn't really need it for the production, but they're using it to teach. Watching those kind of moments of how do you interact with a relationship that has authority to it, but also respect to each other, and making sure that you're friends. Engineers need to have good relationships with technicians, with people on the line, and there's a way to do that that's warm but not too close. It's something that I struggled with in my year in industry, and a lot of my second degree from the School of Hard Knocks came from those technicians. And so them seeing that early on before they get out of school, I think is absolutely golden. And we're continuing to explore avenues that we can do that. We are attempting to offshore some of our labs that we do. So your fluid mechanics lab, your strength and materials lab, we want to put that in an industrial setting where we can do all the diagnostic procedures you would normally do, but be around industry and see what engineering looks like in a business setting.
That's good. Okay, Amanda, that was a lot. You got some questions for him?
Well, yes, Philip, one, I love
Sure.
the journey.
Mhm.
And what I love about it is the actual marker that you've given us, the interest or my attraction to reading the classics is what started me on this journey to being a classicist, even though I was already doing this engineering piece. And I just want to say a great reader, no matter what discipline we're in, will help us learn some of these big ideas. And you and Lee speak math better than I speak math, but I appreciate also the big ideas and the philosophy that you brought out. But I do have a question about the practical. And the practical that I have a question about is, how do those ethics, because I've heard you say moral and I've heard you say ethics. What I haven't seen it is hooked into the foundation of all ethics from a Christ-centered worldview. And I know I'm pushing you a little bit from where Thales is, but tell me about how you bring people not only to be good in the workplace, but good citizens of their church.
Sure.
And hear what I said. I said citizens of the church, not citizens of the country.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, so this is where, and I certainly have freedom as a faculty member. I put on my syllabus, I should probably know what's on the front of my syllabus. I think that either in the physics or the calculus 6, I had a quotation from Aristotle. It probably was something like, what is the purpose of physics? Man, I should really know this. But I also put the quotation from, and this is a Septuagintal book, so it's not going to be in the Protestant canon, but the Book of Wisdom, that God made everything according to number, weight, and measure. And one of the things that I draw out in some of these discussions in physics and mathematics, and even as we think about engineering and what is a machine and how do we use it, the kind of ultimate understanding of a classical education to me is to turn the eyes of the soul to goodness and beauty and truth, and then into the one that made these things. And so there's ultimately a union with the divine that should come about this. And then you even see, and this, I guess this is kind of touching on some of my own personal philosophy. I think you see hopes of this in the pre-Christian tradition. I think that there's a way to be classical and say, with like what Lewis points out, that, Christianity is really the flowering and fulfillment of all of the classical hopes and dreams, either from the Hebraic side or from the Hellenic side. The longing for union, the soul's union with the divine, and finding that goodness in being bound with it, is a hope of really this entire tradition. And really since, I don't know, probably the 5th, 6th century, when Christianity won out, that has been mostly the exclusive expression of that in various forms. There's various different Christian traditions and how they look at this. But that desire through an incarnational person, which we would say is Jesus of Nazareth, the Christ, and then through the guidance of the Holy Spirit to be united into the Godhead, is something that we do. And so I see that the old, our motto at Thales is Scientia. I'm going to mess this up. It's the word for wisdom, Sapientia University. Okay, that's in Rome. Sapientia et Scientia. I'm talking too much. I'm going to have to take a sip of water so I can get my Latin. Unless this is where I make also the awkward pause of, are you ecclesiastical Latin folks, or are you classical? Because we can do
I just say tomato, please
Scientia,
study it,
Scientia,
however you say
something
it.
like
That's
this.
right. Enjoy it.
So I think I get the classical Scientia et Sapientia. The Scientia, from where we get the word science, was not a body of knowledge. I really enjoy Peter Harrison's The Territories of Science Religion on this, because both religio and Scientia meant virtues to the medieval person. Thomas talks about having both of these, St. Thomas Aquinas. In the modern period, they become external bodies of knowledge. It's really kind of fascinating because he talks about how, Calvin's institutes, and I think the Latin, it's kind of ambiguous whether it could be institutes of the Christian religion or the institutes of Christian religion or institutes of the Christian religion or something. Like the article is lacking. And so the inclusion of the article would imply that it's a body of knowledge rather than a virtue. But to the ancient and medieval person, the pursuit of science is this pursuit. Now we could get into, we're going to quickly get into theological points about what, the limits of reason. I do think reason is limited, but I do think reason can inform you to quite a high level, and say that there is beauty in the world, and I long to be united with it. And I see that through science. I think doing science properly is a mode of contemplation on the orderliness and goodness of creation leads the soul to the Creator. There's a limit to which you reach, and you say beyond this, you probably need something revelatory or, I think different Christian traditions are going to have different sociological models about how the mechanism behind this. But there is a gap that then must be traversed. But I think that at least in its aspirations, this is what a classical education should do. It's not, I think if you live a life where it's like, I made the right choice, I worked hard, and I didn't, steal from my company or wound anyone. There is goodness to that. I probably grew up in a tradition that said that was a waste. I think there's some goodness, but it's certainly lacking. The severity to which that lack is punishable also has various degrees. But
one of the lacks that we have when we don't have a holistic view, when we're just into the mechanics of something rather than the classical view or the big view of us set in eternity, or the big view of us set in a place where reason can take us a really long way, because a God who wants to be known would make us able to know. It seems like a very logical deduction there. In that, you at Thales are actually building a program for people who are interested in, we're talking a lot about the engineering school, And they may love the math, but they're getting adjusted to the classical understanding. But some of our classicists, how are they rubbing into the beauty of the mathematics or the quadrivium that are in your engineering program? Because it seems like a great opportunity to cross-pollinate to me.
I think so too. It's been challenging. So I would give an exhortation for those in this movement to push your students in mathematics. It's been challenging because we have some engineering students that they made it through an AP calculus course out of their private Christian school. And then some students that are like, oh, I kind of did some geometry and trigonometry. And those two ends of the scales have been that's kind of it has been an interesting path to trot as a faculty member to accommodate both sides of that. So the first thing is you have to know it and be practiced in it. One of my students came up to me after a month in calculus. Oh, this is so painful. This is one of those moments where you appreciate that the student is comfortable with you enough to say this, but then it hurts so deeply that you're almost like, I wish you were aloof. So they say, they come to me and they're like, I've looked at this. We went over the proof and you explained all this. This is just not beautiful. I'm sorry. They had also complained about the difficulty and how many hours it took them and the unfamiliarity with mathematics. And I'm a humanities person. Why do I have to learn this? I don't need calculus and physics, and all the same excuses that every other math teacher has ever gotten at an advanced level. So there's a lot of responses to that, but the one that I think was most helpful to this student who then embraced it is that learning mathematics and seeing its beauty it is like an ascetic journey of like a monk or a hermit. And you have to discipline yourself, you have to fast, you have to go through exercises that may not be fun. It is discipline. And even if you're coming from a tradition where it's less focused on monasticism, sometimes you just have to do it because you have to do it. And it's not fun and it's not pleasurable and it's not eye-opening, but you have to do it to train yourself. I think that the tradition by and large would speak to this, that the soul has to be in a certain state to be receptive of ideas. And by analogy then, if you just haven't done math in years or done it at a very low level, like you can't see the beauty in some of it. And so you have to train yourself and pick yourself up to do that. And then it will hopefully come. And in this case, this student is actually very hardworking and I can commend them. By the end of the course, we were looking at Gabriel's trumpet. So I don't know if you're familiar with this. So you know the biblical, the Gabriel's trumpet. There's actually a mathematical curve shaped by this is where it would be. I have a whiteboard in here, but it's going to be too much.
Yes, too much. Go ahead.
Go look this up. If you revolve 1/x around an axis, the surface area of the trumpet, I may get this wrong. I think it's this. It has a finite volume and an infinite surface area, or something like this. And this is a result of the way you integrate over this curve. And so it's this kind of unique paradox. It's like this. It's an infinite packed inside a finitude or something. And so he ended up writing an essay, and he got incarnational with it around Christmas about packing the infinity into the finite and how God can do that in a little baby. And it was great. And so he got to see some of this at the end. And that was probably one of my most proud success stories, because they came into it saying, I hate this. And then they got to have that sort of shining in the eye and see that at the end. So that's what we hope in all cases. It's not always like that in all cases, but that's the model that I aspire to for the general course with the students.
Yeah, I remember in a math class, a student brought up in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and Lucy said one time something bigger than the entire universe fit in a stable, and the rest of the kids started crying because they knew what she meant, right? And they were only like 14. So that's really great that student pursued that. So we don't have a lot of time left. I want the parents to know our parents to know some of the logistics. So the students from you told me they're mostly in some sort of seminar in the mornings, and then they have that tutorial in the afternoon. So kind of flesh that out for us. What would it look like if you went to Thales, and how many students are in the seminars?
Right. Yeah. So the way we currently operate is that all of our courses are done by noon. So this is designed so that students can participate in various internships. I talked a lot about engineering internships because that's the program that I'm somewhat of a steward over, but all students are encouraged to participate and really required by their third term to participate in an internship that's at least geared somewhat towards their major. And so with that in line, all of our courses are done right now by noon. We're going to have to take an exception in the future for labs, because 4-hour labs are intense, but they're all done by that. The degree is also 3 years, so we operate year round. It is a 4-year degree. It is an 8-term 4-year degree packed into 3 years. So that means a fall, spring, summer with 2 to 3 week breaks in between, where it's all done in person in Wake Forest. And then within that, so the faculty, depending on what the course is and and who the faculty are and just what are the needs of a particular course. Sometimes lecturers we do try to utilize Socratics where possible. I've utilized them. I have found that reading Socratically through at least the calculus textbooks we use was not helpful. So it's been a blend for me. But where we get that personalized touch is in the tutorials. So either one-on-one or one-on-two. I think I once had a group of 3, but we do try to keep it very small. And what this is it is a detailed review of either a written paper, or in my case, a lab report, or a very challenging complex physics problem or something like that. And the point of this is to get specialized attention to the student, their gifts and their weaknesses and what they need to work on. And that also kind of creates that very personalized, that touch. And this is what traditional education in the classical world would have been, right? It's a form of tutoring where you get that direct attention. I recently made the quib with Mr. Luddy that, in the manufacturing world, you go through a quality check of all your product. And when you, in the mainstream academic institution, when you just give these classes of 200 final exams and say they've passed and you stamp them, it's not really a quality check. Now, a human being is even more important than a product, right? I mean, you can think of education as a process, but there's all kind of problems with that analogy. And in fact, that sort of thinking has probably gotten us into trouble, because shaping a soul is very different. But for that reason, you do need that quality check on the soul, who they are as a person. And we want to have that closeness. Having direct interaction with faculty members, being able to respond in seminars, and that kind of inculcates you in a culture of a discussion, of disputation. I think all of those sort of intangibles of the ethos of the school are built within that. And so this is why we're doing tutorials. The closest I have ever seen to a tutorial model being done in STEM is in graduate school. I did have to participate in an oral exam, and it was absolutely terrifying. And then I got done with it and I was like, that was kind of good, because you can't hide in oral exams. And for some of my students, it's actually been a benefit. So I gave an oral exam last term, and there are some students that, for whatever reason, the paper, I think you should be able to take written instructions and write it out. So I'm a believer in traditional testing, but there are aspects where sometimes the dialogue can help. To jumpstart things and to see what's going on in their mind. And so for all of those reasons, we're big fans of tutorials, oral exams, presentation, verbal communication, etc.
When your tuition's extremely low, how do you make that happen? Especially when you hear that you have one professor per 3 or 6 kids. Right.
So I think that at some point in the future, we'll probably grow into a faculty size where it'll be, we'll probably always keep a low ratio. I don't know if it'll be that low, but we will keep a low ratio because, again, we want to always do these tutorials. Part of it's just the business savviness of the college being founded by someone who's been successful at business for multiple decades. But there's also a kind of an ideological commitment to operate with, a building, with faculty, and to cut administration. We don't have all of these we're not, no one's hired to operate pizza parties in the dorms. There is some form of housing which we facilitate, but we don't have sports. It's very much learn, enjoy your time here, talk with the faculty. You can have afternoon discussions. You can go off to work, but we will provide you a place to study, to think, be with faculty, but a lot of the other gimmicks are largely up to the other students. I mean, I myself personally, I think that physical education is actually part of soul formation, that the bodily training of exercising and learning to deny your body and say no when I'm hurting and I'm going to push for one more bit of exercise, like that's actually good for the soul and other moral decisions that you make down the road. But we don't have sports teams, so we encourage the students to do that, but it's faculty heavy is one of the main things we do.
Okay, and then I'm going to ask Amanda's question again a different way, because just so our audience is clear, the majority of folks we have on are from explicitly Christian institutions, but not always. We all know that children can be little sinners, and who knows where they're actually going to end up, whether they go through a Christian school or not. And so you guys have a classical bent, and obviously you yourself are a Christian. But one of the things we're really interested in is, how does sending our children somewhere, after they leave home, help them become good church members? Because that's where they're really going to live their life out. School's going to end. So what do you think you do that contributes to their ability to serve, a body of people?
Right. Good question. So there have been discussions among us about the benefits of being a confessional school. I think for those of us, and I will say that almost all, this hasn't been polled or surveyed, but again, just as a tight knit group of people getting to know the students, I think that almost all, there's really one that I have a question about or have confessed to be Christian in some form or another. And it's a good split. We have Catholics and we have various Protestant denominations. So the first question about being confessional to us is, is it a Catholic school? Is it a Reformed school or whatnot? So that's part of the reason, I think, for some of the lack of being outright confessional. But I've prayed at the start of my class before exams. We prayed before meals when we have kind of in the occasion where we have a school sanctioned sort of time to eat together. There's nothing that's prohibiting that. Now, is it promoting it? We have largely encouraged the students to. That's really on their own. But again, out of our initial batch, I think like 3/4 of our first cohort are homeschooled. And so they're here, they're local thus far in the Triangle with their families. And so they're for the most part just attending the churches they grew up in. As we continue to grow, this is something that we're exploring. So our next cohort, we're having someone come from out of state. And I haven't met them from the admissions team, but I'm not sure what they're going to do, frankly, Lee. But I think that the cohort of students we have, the faculty that we have that I all know personally, are all going to be able to encourage this. So if you go to our website, you're not going to see a statement of faith. You're going to see a commitment, again, to a classical tradition, to morals. And I think that it is very easy to say that the expression of that is going to be Christianity in the Western tradition. But there are reasons why we have not taken that commitment thus far. But if anyone has any particular questions, myself, anyone else on the faculty or admissions team, we would love to talk with them about that. And we could probably alleviate what concerns they have.
All right. So this is Phillip Johnson, Dean of Engineering at ThalesCollege.com here in North Carolina, where I live. Amanda's over on the West Coast. So hopefully something similar will pop up for the engineers that are serious about classical education where you live too. And I just want folks to know, next week, Amanda, tell us about Laura Barth, who's our guest.
Well, Robert Barth is going to be here, who's the academic dean, and Laura Barth, who is related to him, is going to be on, and she's in the admissions and has her own story about not going to a university and still getting a legal education. Not every one of us is going to end up as our first stop out of our gate from leaving homeschooling or leaving our classical Christian school for high school in a university. So a different model coming up next week.
Great. So thanks, Phillip, for representing a brand new school with trying to do a new philosophy of classical education that really embraces the sciences too. We need a lot more people to understand the quadrivium, and it just makes my heart happy to know you're alive and doing what you're doing. So thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Bye, Amanda. Bye, Phillip.
Bye, Phillip. Bye, Lee. Thanks.
Mhm.